The Omicron variant is causing an uptick in COVID-19 cases, not just here in the U.S., but around the world. Omicron has been found in at least 89 countries, according to the World Health Organization. Cases are doubling every 1.5 to 3 days, with areas with community transmission. In London, Omicron is now the dominant variant, with more than 10,000 new cases in a 24-hour period. The mayor has declared a major incident as cases rise by nearly 200% in just the last 2 weeks. The situation in London has prompted France to ban most travel from the UK. France has also amended testing requirements. Travelers will have to show a negative COVID-19 test taken within 24 hours instead of 48 hours. And Sunday marked day one of a strict lockdown in the Netherlands over Omicron concerns. People went shopping on Saturday ahead of the lockdown. Non-essential businesses will be closed until at least mid-January. People are being urged to stay at home as much as possible, and there are strict limits on the number of people who can gather for the holidays. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab has more from London.
Britain is convulsing under the strain caused by Omicron. In central London, violence broke out between police and anti-vaxxers outside Parliament, where demonstrators were demanding an end to vaccine mandates and other COVID measures. The unrest comes as chilling new government figures show England has recorded the highest number of children admitted to hospital with COVID since the start of the pandemic. 65 under 18s were hospitalized with COVID on December the 12th, with more than half just 5 years old and under.
They're a lot younger than the patients that we had in the first and second surge.
As record numbers of new infections threaten to strain the UK's already struggling national health system, Britain's booster shot program has been turbocharged. Every minute, 100 people are being boosted in London alone.
So the waiting time is 2.5 to 3 hours.
Despite the long lines in places, few here were complaining.
Is that why you're getting your booster?
Yeah, definitely. Peace of mind, really, if anything else.
Across Europe, Omicron concerns have led to a wave of new COVID restrictions, including in the Netherlands, where holiday shoppers were given just a few hours' notice the country was going into a full national lockdown until at least mid-January. Caretaker Prime Minister Mark Rutte said the country will have, quote, another Christmas that is completely different from what we would like, calling it very bad news. But there is a glimmer of hope. The first at-home treatment for COVID has been given to patients in the UK as part of a major Oxford University study. Molnupiravir will be tested on 10,000 people at risk of serious illness, a move and a medication being described as a game changer.
And Imtiaz joins me now. Imtiaz, welcome. Just now heard in your report how much children are being affected. Can you tell us more about that?
Hey, Lana, good to talk to you. Yeah, I mean, the statistics are pretty staggering. This is some pretty recent research we've just gotten from the UK government, where they found on one day alone, on the 12th of December, that the highest number of kids had been admitted to hospital since the start of the pandemic. That number is 65, and half of those kids are the age of 5 and under. Now, this is, of course, extremely alarming. We are now so far into this pandemic. Omicron is now the main variant here in the UK. We haven't been able to parse just what exactly these children are infected with, whether it's with Delta or with Omicron. But what we do know, and what this does tell us, is that we are in a new phase of this pandemic where people who otherwise may not have come down with serious illness, in this case children, are now coming down with serious illness, and that, of course, is very concerning. Lana.
5 and under, of course, jumping out at me as a parent of a child who's in that category, who still isn't qualified yet for a vaccine, and I'm sure that's concerning to other parents that are hearing your reporting as well. Imtiaz, is there talk of other countries going into a lockdown like the Netherlands?
Yeah, I mean, the lockdown that was called in the Netherlands really took a lot of people in that country by surprise. In fact, people were really only given a few hours notice before that lockdown went into place. And you could see shoppers, on the streets in the last sort of hours before this lockdown went into place, trying to get whatever they can. And now the streets of that country are virtually empty. People have to be at home. These are the strictest lockdown measures in all of Europe right now. Now, as for other countries, right now it's only speculation. A number of nations have imposed other restrictions as well. We have Paris canceling its New Year's celebration. Cyprus and Austria have tightened travel restrictions. Ireland has imposed curfews, and here in the UK, we effectively have a state of emergency, a major incident, as it's being called, as really this city is bracing itself for the onslaught of Omicron. So much about this variant is still unknown. In fact, the World Health Organization really saying that they still need to do a lot more testing and do a lot more research before we can really say with any sort of definitive definition that these vaccines that we have are really going to prevent it. We are seeing some pretty good signs that these boosters are a really good mechanism to prevent any major illness. But again, all of this is really fueling this concern ahead of the Christmas holidays. In fact, here in the UK, just anecdotally, I can tell you that people are canceling their plans, that people who had normally planned to go see their families or to have big gatherings or parties, well, those have been scrapped. And in fact, it's really the Queen who's leading the way in this. She was supposed to have her traditional Christmas lunch with her family, but Omicron has led her to cancel that. Lana.
Oh, Imtiaz, tell us, especially as people are looking forward to travel and thinking that after skipping family gatherings last year, that this time they'll actually be able to get together. What are you hearing about travel restrictions around the world?
Yeah, these restrictions are only increasing and are only spreading. Of course, Southern African countries have been banned from multiple nations very early on as soon as this variant was discovered. But now it's spreading. You have travelers from the UK no longer being allowed to travel into places like France. You also have other restrictions that are being imposed elsewhere. And all of this really just speaks to this broader concern about Omicron. What we know about COVID, what we know about this pandemic that we've been living in for nearly 2 years now, is that lockdown measures work. It slows the spread of the virus. We know social distancing works. It slows the spread of the virus. The problem is lockdowns and real strict social distancing measures, whether it's curfews or restricting the numbers of people who can go into restaurants or bars or pubs or shopping centers, really has an impact on our lives. And people are exhausted. I've been hearing that. You no doubt have been hearing that. We are so far into this pandemic, and yet here we are again for the second Christmas in a row in which people are going to have to pull back. People are going to have to withdraw into their homes. Some of it being mandated by the government, but a lot of people making these decisions on their own, saying, I understand this virus, I understand this pandemic, I'm going to make these decisions to protect myself. And I want to add, here in the UK, we have a booster shot program, and it's really been turbocharged. In fact, since it really started ramping up and allowing basically anybody over the age of 18 to receive a booster shot, over half of the country's adults here in the UK have received the booster shot. In fact, according to the mayor of London, every minute, 100 people have been boosted here in the city of London. It's extraordinary to see just how many people are taking this seriously, are looking at these boosters as a way out of this. But again, as we've been saying, there are still big questions as to just what exactly the efficacy is of all of these sort of bits of advice that we've been given. But again, it really just goes to show just how seriously people are taking COVID here in the UK and indeed in many other countries, but also the frustration. And very quickly, I do want to add, we have seen protests. Here in the UK, protests were quite angry, major confrontations between the police and essentially anti-vaxxers. We've seen protests in the Netherlands over the past several months, some of them extremely violent, with police, opening fire on crowds. And so we're in this, I guess, the stage, if you will, of the pandemic where you have people who are resigned to trying to protect themselves and other people, and those who are just fed up and just want it to end.
All right, Imtiaz, thank you and happy holidays.